Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're joining us because we are diving headfirst into a truly fascinating economic case study today. We're going to unpack the nuts and bolts of the soybean market and specifically look at a wild sequence of events that totally shifted how we think about market disruptions and government interventions. If you're a fan of seeing how cause and effect actually play out in real-time economics, you are going to love this. We're breaking down the exact flow of this capital step by step. So let's just get right into it.
Right off the bat, this brings us to the central paradox of our source material. And honestly, I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind as we unpack this whole timeline. Basically, first, a tax broke the market, and then the revenue from that exact same tax was used to fix it. So, is this a genius policy or just a financial loop? It's a pretty incredible premise, right? We're looking at a situation where the cure and the cause are literally tied to the exact same pot of money. Now, we're not here to take a political side on whether the tax itself was right or wrong. Instead, we're going to impartially examine the sheer raw mechanics of this economic phenomenon and see exactly how it worked.
All right, let's start right at the beginning with Section 1, the market-breaking tax. The premise here is super simple, but man, it's devastating. You know, markets rely on equilibrium, that really delicate balance of supply and demand. Well, when a new tax is introduced, it acts like a giant shockwave to that system. It totally scrambles the pricing structures that buyers and sellers rely on every single day. In the context of our soybean case study, dropping this tax wasn't just a tiny speed bump. It was a major catalyst that severely disrupted the entire agricultural market equilibrium. Overnight, it changed the math for literally everyone buying and selling these crops.
And that major disruption leads us right into Section 2. Panda stops buying.
The immediate, on-the-ground reaction to that market shock was lightning fast. First, the tax hits the market. Next, a major international buyer, who our source refers to as Panda, completely halts their soybean purchases. Just stops dead. I mean, imagine being a farmer for a second. You've got your fields planted, your yields are projected for the year, and suddenly, because of this new tax hitting the broader market, one of your absolute biggest buyers just walks away. The demand completely vanishes. Your crops are still growing out there, but the economic destination for them, poof, completely evaporated.
With the market effectively broken for those farmers, we arrive at Section 3, the $12 billion bailout.
$12 billion, okay. That is a staggering figure. When a colossal buyer like Panda suddenly stops buying, the financial devastation on the ground is both immediate and severe. To stop a total catastrophic collapse of the agricultural sector, a massive financial fix was absolutely necessary. So, the government stepped in and issued an eye-watering $12 billion bailout designed specifically to prop up those impacted soybean farmers. It was basically a massive safety net deployed to stabilize a market that was in absolute freefall.
When we lay this out chronologically, the cause and effect loop is stunningly fast. Check this out. In month 1, the disruptive tax is introduced. Almost immediately, in month 2, the buyer, Panda, reacts by stopping their purchases entirely. And by month 3, the situation is already so incredibly dire that this $12 billion bailout has to be issued. We go from policy implementation directly to a massive market failure, straight into an enormous government payout, all within the span of a single financial quarter. Talk about whiplash.
Which brings us to our final analytical phase in Section 4, a financial loop.
So the absolutely crucial point here is how our source redefines a circular economy for this specific scenario. Normally, you hear that term and you think, recycling or environmental sustainability, right? But here, we're strictly talking about capital flow. This is a system where the tax revenue generated from that initial market disruption, the very same tax that caused Panda to stop buying, is literally fed right back into the impacted agricultural sector as a bailout. Yep, the money collected by the policy that broke the market is being used to write the checks to save the market.
And that brings us full circle back to our initial paradox. On the one hand, you could look at this and call it a genius policy. You could totally argue that creating a mechanism that pays for its own fallout is incredibly pragmatic, right? The tax revenue funds the fix, neutralizing the damage without having to pull in outside capital. But, on the other hand, is this just a continuous financial loop? Is it truly a solution, or are we just watching the same money run in a giant circle? If the tax caused the problem and the tax pays for the problem, are we actually generating any positive economic value here, or are we just treading water in a very expensive, continuous loop? The source lays out the mechanics completely neutrally, leaving us to really chew on those two distinct perspectives.
Honestly, the mechanics of how capital flows through disrupted markets are just fascinating, and this soybean case study perfectly highlights how wildly interwoven taxes, global buyers, and domestic bailouts really are. As our source invites us, join our community to understand these complex financial cycles. It's an open invitation to keep digging into the data and to keep asking the hard questions about how these systems function. So I'll leave you with this. Where else might these invisible financial loops be operating in our economy right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes open for the next complex cycle.